When this baby hits 88 miles an hour, you're gonna see some serious
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Hey kids, welcome to Grumpy Nostalgia, the Second Look Cinema podcast, the show where we go back to the blockbuster new release full of our memory, we grab a coffee off that shelf, we pop it in our VCR, and we see what time has done to it. I'm Justin, that's Mike.
Hey Justin, good day. I realized today that it's hip to be square. Do you know that?
Oh, here. Some drinking game activated. And together we're going to help you navigate all the landmines littered down memory lane. So Mike, before we get too far ahead, I just want to I want to put this at the front of the show as opposed to the end when most people don't have enough stamina to stay with us anyway. But the numbers are in, and I want to proud to announce that July was our third highest month in downloads ever in the history of Grumpy Nostalgia.
Whoa.
Yeah, and
July.
just barely falling slightly behind the previous month in June. So we've had 2 months here that are second and third highest download months ever, respectively. And that's got a lot to do with people listening right now, so thank you very much.
Any particular movie driving that influx, or is it just kind of a rant? Everybody wanted to hear all of our work.
Well, it was a rush back to get caught up on the catalog by a couple, as we kind of mentioned the last time. People really love Time Bandits, so I was not expecting, given that little niche category it was in. But yeah, that really drove a lot of traffic. We were not expecting that. Maybe there's some people that thought there was something about the new series, and they were sadly mistaken.
We'll get to that later.
But I mean, sadly, I mean very sadly. But all that notwithstanding, guys, thank you very much for helping us climb up to the charts, and we are truly humbled that you guys continue to listen to a couple of adults that don't know what they're doing every time.
All right,
that's great. So
now that we're moving up the charts, it's time for the long distance dedication.
That's right.
It's the last goddamn time I want somebody to use his fucking brain to not come out of a goddamn record that is that's up tempo, and I got to talk about a fucking dog dying.
Tell me about that damn dog dying again.
It's ponderous. It's ponderous, Justin.
Ponderous, man. So we've been kind of talking about time travel movies here. Like 3 of the last 4 movies we talked about, probably 4 out of 5, we could consider time travel movies.
Yeah.
And we thought,
you take Gone in 60 Seconds, which is a car movie, and then you take Time Bandits, which is a time travel movie. Hey, car,
there you
time
go,
travel
right?
was possibly the next movie we're going to do, and it's this one.
The ultimate time travel movie here, Mike. We're going to talk about everybody's favorite.
Back to the future!
From 1985.
Wow. Yeah, it hit me when I was watching. I was like, oh my gosh, it's almost 30 years old.
It's
40.
It's ponderous is what it is.
40 years old, man. That's crazy.
It's funny because we watched the movie, of course. Me and my wife did last weekend, but the prior weekend we saw the musical Back to the Future.
Hello, Frisco.
Which is kind of the reason I wanted to do this movie, because I could just get it all out of my system at once. What's interesting about modern Broadway musicals, Mike, off-Broadway things, is they're really hip on taking on movie adaptations now. What I'm finding is they're taking a quaint little 102-minute movie and turning it into a 3-hour and 20-minute musical.
Funny how that works, huh?
Said 2 acts. But it was fun. It was well done. The production values were really good. They did a lot of superimposed film over the screen to kind of tell the story. The actors are relatively good, but nothing that can compare to these original guys back in the day, Mike. So let's kind of just jump in, because we've kind of rambled enough. We're running out of time, Mike.
Already? Wow.
Yes.
Okay, let's go back in time. How about that?
Okay, very good. So this was directed by a guy named Robert Zemeckis. We all know from several iconic movies. He did Romancing the Stone, Used Cars, which is an underrated comedy that enough people know about. Of course, he did Forrest Gump, the first movie I saw with my wife when we were dating, Mike, just FYI.
Nice.
Yeah. Of course.
Coming to America for me.
Oh, okay, that's not bad. He did Castaway, Contact, and then he's kind of fallen off this a little bit with his most recent attempts, Pinocchio, which was widely reviled by most audiences.
Yeah,
And
it was
welcome
flop.
to Marwin.
Oh, gosh.
Steve Carell,
Yeah.
Sat Machine. Nobody seemed to like that either. He's a Chicago guy, so he's got that going for him. And interesting about Bob is he's a writer as well. He served as the film's writer along with a guy named Bob Gale. They collaborated on screenplay for 1941, Used Cars, and Bordello of Blood, which is another movie I took my wife to a few weeks later. Did turn out as well. This movie was almost impossible to get made, and we'll kind of get to that here in a minute. And there's some interesting contractual agreements that were made as a result of that. And I'm teasing a little bit here, Mike. We'll get that here in a minute. So this movie has an iconic storyline. It's genuinely regarded as one of the best scripts ever written. USC Film School uses this script as a meta example of like what a perfect screenplay is. They teach basics of screenwriting around this one. So, but what really makes this a memorable experience, of course, Mike, is the cast. So do that thing you do where you talk about the people that acted in the movie.
Oh, yeah. Eric Stoltz was not in this movie. This movie kind of begins and ends with Michael J. Fox, who, famously played Alex P. Keaton on Family Ties. And believe it or not, he doesn't have any Elvis inside him. I didn't know if you knew that or not.
I did not know that.
Michael J. Fox has no Elvis in him.
Elvis is everywhere. Elvis is everything.
Credit to Mojo Nixon. He's a bit of a slacker, in this movie. He plays Marty McFly. Apparently really good at playing guitar, and that's about all you know. And,
I want to talk about that later. Let's not forget to talk about his musical ability.
That's right. Leah Thompson is his mom. She's also a big fan of Howard the Duck. And she was in a really bad NBC must-see TV show on Thursday night called Caroline in the City. I think I remember that.
Oh, yeah.
Other than that, this was her movie. This is her big movie. There's a lot of people like that in this that, like even the guy who played Biff, Thomas Wilson.
Tom Wilson, yeah.
Yeah, I know I knew him as a stand-up comedian, but like I can't think of anything else he was in besides the Back to the Future series. Crispin Glover, kind of a weird actor. He's most famously attached to this movie for either like trying to sue the makers of this movie constantly and being replaced for not being in the second movie, which, I think he wanted a bit of money. Okay, now you correct me if I'm wrong. Justin, this is going to be a question for all our podheads out there. Heads. I think the only actor or actress in this movie that we've had in a previous podcast was Mark McClure, who plays the older brother, and he's also Jimmy Olsen in the
Jimmy Olsen from Superman, yeah.
There's nobody else in this movie that like would be recognizable to us as far as what we've actually seen.
Yeah.
Christopher Lloyd's probably the other famous person from this movie.
Well, Mike, unfortunately, if you want me to go ahead and correct you here, I will.
Yeah, who was
Billy Zane is in this movie.
He had a bit part in what before this, or what's the movie?
In Tombstone, he had the fantastic curls in the acting troupe.
That was him. Okay, I thought there was a Billy Zane reference somewhere. Okay,
we delighted in talking about him during that episode for sure.
Well, in this movie, he doesn't even say a word that I can tell.
He's just one of Biff's goons, right?
He's the
guy that didn't have the 3D glasses on. Yeah,
he had a match behind his ear, so I guess they didn't have a name for him until after the movie had rolled and said
he was in all three movies though.
We're going to put you in the credits as Match. Yeah. I figured they didn't have a name for him.
Billy Zane. All right, can we quit now?
Yeah, pretty much. Christopher Lloyd is probably the other big name in this. He's been in so many movies, good and bad. Baby Geniuses comes to mind. Most famous was his role as Jim Igatowski from Taxi, where he was kind of Kramer from Seinfeld before there was a Kramer.
Yep. But analogy, yeah.
It's interesting how the makeup in this movie makes him look so much older than he really is, and he's he's still kicking the day and still in movies that I could tell. He was in the movie I saw Bob Odenkirk with where he's a hitman. Do you know what I'm talking about? It just came out last year.
Nobody.
Thank you.
Great
And,
movie. He was fantastic, and he was a badass in it too, man.
yeah, he was. It was really good.
He killed a lot of people for an old guy. There's hope for us yet, Mike.
And I want to give a special shout out to Huey Lewis, who has a cameo as a music judge. And his music is featured a couple times in the movie, and along with his band, The News. And there's a poster of him in Marty's bedroom.
That's correct.
The cover of Sports, which I'm sure Patrick Bateman could tell you a lot about.
Yeah.
And there's also DeLorean time travel consultant on this, and I saw it in the credits. I thought that was interesting. They actually had a credit for a make-believe time machine, but they had to have a consultant, which I'm assuming the guy must have been like a physicist from Berkeley or something. But I just like the fact they gave him a DeLorean time travel consultant moniker. That was pretty clever.
Yeah, the time travel gimmick was relatively well handled here. They didn't it wasn't too self-referential or inside jokey. They kind of treated it with a little bit of science. So
yeah, and it makes sense.
Sort of made sense, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for time travel, if it actually existed, it would make sense. But anyway, that's your cast.
But from a script like plot contrivance thing, it's one of the better examples of how this trope can work if you write a good script around it. So thanks, Mike. So just a couple of notes on this movie and the cast. So Michael J. Fox was, of course, famously the replacement for Eric Stoltz. They got about 2/3 of the way into filming where they decided he was not working out. He didn't want to be there either. Kind of
was he getting ready to film Wolverine, or was he did he have bad was he allergic to the makeup like Buddy Ebsen? Was there an issue somewhere?
No, nothing that dramatic. He was a method actor. He decided to go method for this because, Marty McFly, that's a complex role. That's kind of bugged everybody. He wasn't in love with the script. It was just they just miscast him. So as a result of that, they had to start shooting over again, which cost another $3 million of the film's budget, which just did not work. Prior to all that nonsense, they had auditioned Johnny Depp, Ralph Macchio, John Cusack, of course. Went with Stoltz, and then figured out that Michael J. Fox was the TV actor they wanted to go with. John Lithgow was considered for Doc Brown here instead of Christopher Lloyd. I could see that working probably.
Yeah, there's a lot of scenery chewing there.
Biff, the local bully, as you mentioned, played by comedian Tom Wilson. That was originally considered for Tim Robbins. But he left. I was talking about Zemeckis earlier. So he and the screenwriter, Bob Gale, have an interesting clause regarding the rights to this movie. They said that they own the rights, and as long as both of them stay alive, no one is allowed to remake this movie. So we're not going to get a remake of this one. So we're bulletproof on that, Mike. So that's one good thing we talked about.
That's really good. Oh my gosh. That's pretty far. That's seeing into the future very well. Wow. It's like they had a time machine and actually could tell what our imagineering people in Hollywood could not think of any ideas. So they thought
40 years from now, and you guys are out of ideas. You're not remaking this.
That's amazing.
Over my dead body, not on my watch.
Does the clause specify whether both of them have to be dead, or is it just one of them? Or is it?
I think they both have to be like either one is alive.
I want to find those guys and resuscitate them if it's possible. Give them all kinds of vitamins.
Hey, so Bob, cut out all that caffeine. Eat healthy. John DeLorean, the famous auto designer that cars feature so prominently in this, wrote a fan letter to them. Obviously, this was a wonderful marketing campaign for the DeLorean, which not a lot of people knew about. It was rejected 44 times. Each script was rejected by a major studio. Those are all archived in Robert Zemeckis' personal diary. Because of the height difference, they had to use a lot of forced perspective shots. Michael J. Fox is 5'4", and Christopher Lloyd is 6'1". And, they can't have Michael J. Fox standing on a box in every scene. So they had to do some tricky camera work to get both in frame.
They do what they did in the Interview with a Vampire of Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt and tried to,
Yeah. Brad Pitt had to act out of a trench.
Yes, that was awesome.
Producer Sid Sheinberg, who did Jaws as well. We talked about him a few shows back. He insisted that this movie be called Spaceman from Pluto. He did not like Back to the Future. He didn't understand what that meant. Producer Steven Spielberg pulled him aside one day and said, "Hey, Sid, nah, we're not going to call it that. Trust Zemeckis. He knows what he's doing." Which, yeah. Doesn't have the same ring to it, does it?
Not quite. It's
Yeah.
like the what was that Disney movie, the John Taylor from Mars or whatever?
John Carter, yeah.
Carter from Mars. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it was just your title. It's just it can mean everything, you know.
Yeah. So speaking of the DeLorean, they still make the DeLorean in air quotes, but it's it's a kit, it's a replica of it. You can still buy them, but the new ones feature a flux capacitor in the car. It's an aesthetic only thing, of course, Mike. You can't go back to the future. I'm sorry.
Darn it! I have some plutonium ready to go.
The flux capacitor was also originally featured in the movie Buckaroo Banzai, Mike, which I think you need to finally break down and watch. But they borrowed that idea from them. This was shot on the same studio lot as the movie Gremlins, which is sort of interesting.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Maybe
cool.
not, maybe not. I don't know.
I don't know how you don't. I mean, with a movie like this, it's so many outdoor locations. You don't see a lot of, indoor
But it's
shots.
all universal backlot for the most part.
Yeah.
This movie puts to the test one of the grumpy nostalgia observations. One of our favorite mantras here. It's the Pepsi curse, Mike.
Oh yeah.
This is a movie that features Pepsi pretty predominantly.
Easter eggs abound in this one. That was it was amazing how many times they were able to find a place to put either a Mountain Dew or Pepsi logo somewhere.
It stretches the boundary of our hypothesis that Pepsi in the movie makes it bad. It's the first real test to test the strength of the system.
Yeah.
For this release, but yeah. So this was 1985. In the theaters prior to this, a couple of weeks earlier, you had St. Elmo's Fire, Rat Pack Spectacular, and you had Pale Rider. This movie came out on July 3rd with a budget of nearly $19 million. The following week, you had Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Probably my least favorite of the Mad Max, but still a good one. And then the next month, you had relatively soft Explorers and Pee-wee's Big Adventure. There weren't a lot of big hits in July. Back to the Future was the #1 movie for a staggering 3 months in a row.
Wow.
So obviously for that year for the box office, it was #1, followed closely by Rambo, Rocky IV, The Color Purple, that got nominated for 11 Oscars, won none of them, and Out of Africa, which won all those Oscars.
Yeah.
Yeah, so including the one for Best Picture. On the music scene, Mike, we always like to dabble in the music scene. What was going on in 1985 on the radio? You had Raspberry Beret.
It's the kind you find in a secondhand store.
Confirming my revisionist history that I don't think I like Prince that much. Not a big fan.
Yeah, Under the Cherry Moon is not very good.
The next song on the top 10 was View to a Kill by Duran Duran, which I think is one of the better Bond songs of all time.
Yeah. Well, bad movie, but good song.
Yeah. Number 3 was Glory Days by The Boss. Number 4, Voices Carry by the band Till Tuesday.
Hush.
Establishing my 40-year love affair with Amy Mann. She still looks great. Money for Nothing, air quotes, Chicks for Free, and air quotes.
I just heard that song on the radio recently, and it was like a cut for modern day ears, and they took out a whole chorus of it. And I was like, whoa, what happened?
There's things you can't say in that thing anymore.
just skipped a whole few lines there. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, hey, there's a verse missing here, guys.
Yeah.
And number 6 was The Power of Love, Mike, which has been in my head for about 2 weeks since I saw that damn musical. So I was hoping I would exercise this song by finishing this podcast, and that's the real motivation behind us covering this movie. So pennies dropped, gang. Some other things just random going on in 1985. This is the year the first Starbucks opened. A young man was getting heat from his father-in-law saying, hey, you better get out of here and get to work, get a job. So he started a little cafe that ended up being Starbucks. So he proved his father-in-law wrong on that one. The original Coke recipe came back. This is after the new Coke debacle. And it was such a big event that ABC preempted General Hospital to make the news announcement.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, Bill Cosby, what were you doing dabbling in that for?
Yeah, different time. I don't really want to talk about TV because 80s TV was just 80s TV. What I want to talk about here is candy, Mike. So the most popular movie candies this year were the Sour Patch Kids. That was their premiere year. Same as Nerds, Mike. You get Nerds that year finally.
That was the first year of Nerds. Wow.
Yeah. The Candy Razzles was also a big seller. Big fan of the Razzles. It's candy, then it's a gum, Mike. It's 2 for 1. He had Fun Dip, which I still think is the greatest thing ever made, but just the stick, not the dip. And then Now and Later's, which is everybody's favorite, of course. Button candy was big back then. Remember button candy, Mike?
Button candy, yeah. I think I've still seen that somewhere.
Yeah. For those that may not know what that is, it was essentially just goo dotted on a paper ribbon.
Yeah.
And you ended up eating more paper as a child. It was horrendous. But awful candy. But people, if I had some today, I'd be eating it right now. So there you go.
Yeah, I just got a craving for wacky wafers for some reason.
Wacky wafers. I know your affinity for those.
Yeah.
So talking about bad habits from the past, Mike, maybe we should jump into this movie. What do you say?
Let's do it. And don't give the Bobs any wacky wafers.
That's right. All right, Mike, if you would please hit the button. The movie opens with Marty. He's a rebel, skateboarder, your average teen. He comes into Doc Brown's mansion, have a house. There's a bunch of clocks everywhere, Mike, establishing the time element, which I think is smart.
Yeah.
It's clever. Marty's a musician, of course, and he sees a really wimpy-looking guitar on the floor.
Small axe.
And there's a giant Lemmy-sized amplifier in the room, and he turns it up to 11 and turns on the modulation up and strikes a chord, and he flies across the room, Mike. But his eardrums stay intact. I think that probably would have bloodied his eardrums for that pressure differential. Whatever.
Possibly, yeah.
I don't want to see little Michael's ears bleeding to start the movie anyway.
That's the stuntman landing in that chair pretty good, though.
You mean stunt boy?
Stunt boy. Who knows? The guy was covered up very well in clothes.
But anyway, he's there, and the phone starts ringing. He picks it up, and it's Doc Brown. He says, it's very exasperated, Doc Brown. He says, Marty, you got to meet me at Twin Pines parking lot tonight at 1:15 a.m. He says he will, and no problem. And then he heads off to school. And that day at school is interesting because he gets introduced to, the local bullies. He's kind of an outsider. His band auditions for Battle of the Bands for school, and they get kicked out. The Pinheads, Mike.
The Pinheads.
I think they played a version of Power of Love, right?
It was. It was an instrumental thing.
Instrumental version, but Huey Lewis is one of the teachers, says it's no good. It's too loud. So he fails there, and he's all depressed. He goes home to meet the family, and that's where he sees his father, Crispin Glover, who we could talk for hours about this guy, but he plays this kind of nerdy dad George, getting harassed by his boss, a guy named Biff, getting bullied to do his work for him. And as they're sitting having breakfast, Mom comes out drinking a bottle of vodka, and the kids are there, and they're pretty much white trash. Let's not lie, Mike.
His brother works at Burger King.
That's right. He's got a great job. They're giving a bunch of grief about taking crap from Biff, and
just a inside note there for people who don't remember. Burger King used to be contracted to sell Pepsis, so there's
there you go.
There you
of
go.
course. And Mom tells the story about how her and Dad met at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, and that's how they fell in love. And this is exposition framed in the phrase of, making fun of your parents, which I think is relatively clever.
I think everything about the setup for this movie was fantastic.
Right there at the kitchen table, everything that's going to happen.
Well, even like just going through the little town square and all the exposition for you is just in the background. Even like the sign on Doc Brown's wall, a little newspaper article, different places, the guy running for mayor, and just there's so many little things that were just done so casually. Like there's no character just sitting there in front of you saying, yes, I remember in 1955 when this, even the lady giving the flyer about the clock breaking.
Yeah, the clock tower that got struck by lightning. Yeah.
Everything's done so smoothly. I guess it's, like you say, part of the having a good script,
Yeah. So we cut to 1:15 a.m. and Arnie makes a beeline to the mall. And we'll explain what malls are on another episode, guys. But it's basically a brick and mortar Amazon that used to get a piece of Sparrow pizza and actually see a movie every now and then. So,
although I will say the photo booth kiosk in the parking lot, that was a thing, but I don't remember that by the mid 80s. I think they had kind of phased a lot of those out, but I thought,
was that a photo mat?
Yeah, like a photo mat in the middle of the parking lot. We had a couple of those in Charlotte, and there's still one that's left, but I think they made it into like a key store, like a cell phone store, but that was a relic from another day.
There's another anachronism we'll have to explain on another show.
Photo mat. Yeah.
So he's in the parking lot in the middle of the night, and then out of a blast out of nowhere, this DeLorean appears, literally appears in front of him, And we find out that Doc Brown has discovered how to travel in time because he put his dog in there. They do a little test, and he comes back 1 minute later in time. And of course, the time machine is powered by plutonium. Everybody knows basically the story. I'm just going to go through here really quick. But Doc stole a bunch of plutonium from the Libyans to power the flux capacitor. And unfortunately, the Libyans find him this night, Mike, and they shoot him dead.
That was in 1985. That was the big bad. It wasn't
Libyans.
It wasn't the Iranians or the Iraqis at the time. It was the Libyans.
That's right. But they kill Doc, and then Marty, of course, fearing for his life, gets in the DeLorean and speeds off. And when he hits 88 miles an hour, Mike, guess what happens?
Oof.
He goes back in time. And the timer had been set earlier by Doc Brown to go back 30 years in the past. So Marty ends up exploding through time and driving through 1955. And he kind of smashes the car into a barn, kind of hides the car, and drives into town in his red life preserver. Mike, I thought it was funny. This is something as simple as a vest, insulated vest. People didn't know what that was back then. They thought he was in the Navy.
A sailor.
Yeah. So Marty goes in this diner and asks for a Pepsi free. And the guy says, "Well, you can't have one for free. You got to pay." Put it on my tab. I think it's put on my tab. You don't have a tab. So tab was great. I wish tab was still in place. But as at the diner, it's where he meets George, the younger version of his father. And of course, the bullies come in and start beating him up, and he gets to see what a loser his dad is. And then he's in a search to find Doc, so he goes to the phone book and finds Doc Brown's address, and he ends up finding Doc Brown. And it's a tough sell to explain to him, that he's from the future, because Doc Brown hasn't thought of this yet. He had only hit his head on the toilet that morning. But he tells the story with news only he would know from the future, and that convinced Doc Brown to let him in. And he starts to explain the impact of what's happened to Marty, and that doing what he's doing and interrupting that first meeting with his parents could interrupt the space-time continuum. And he proves it by, pulling a photo out of Marty's wallet to show part of his family starting to evaporate.
Erased from existence.
So that's the plot, and that's the turn of the movie. So they've got to do two things. They've got to figure out a way to get enough power to get Marty in the car to go back to the future, hence the title, right? But in the meantime, he's got to figure out a way to undo their density. What he's changed density of their parents' meeting. He's got to figure out a way to get his mom to meet her father, and that doesn't work so well because on the way to the house he sees his father as a peeping tom up in ogling his mother, and he falls out of the tree, and instead of getting hit by the car, which is the original story that her mom remembers, Marty pushes out of the way, and then he gets hit by the car and gets taken in, and then there's a real Oedipus thing going on here, Mike, where his mom starts to have a significant crush on Marty, and that's a little unpleasant. So the rest of the second act is figuring out a way to figure out how to undo this stuff. They've come to the conclusion that they can't get plutonium in 1955, but they know because of the clock tower getting struck by lightning, there's this 1.21 gigawatts.
1.21 gigawatts! 1.21 gigawatts! My God!
What the hell is a gigawatt?
1.25 gigawatts of power will be generated by this lightning strike, but they have to time it properly. But before they do any of that, they've got to, again, there'll be nothing to go back to if Marty ceases to exist. So he spends a good bit of the second act getting George to man up and giving him tips and tricks about how to woo Lorraine. She's appreciative of George, but she's got the hots for Marty. So it all kind of culminates in the prom. Like Marty decides he's going to assault his mother that night and stage a fight where George will come in and knock him out, and then kind of prove to his mom that she'll fight for him and she's the man in her life. But that plan goes awry, Mike, because Biff shows up before the plane starts to go down.
Biff and his goons.
They take Marty McFly out of the car, beat him up a little bit, and throw him in the trunk. And as that's happening, George comes in and tells him to get his damn hands off of her. Damn dirty ape, Mike.
Yes.
But he finds out that it's not Marty, but in fact Biff. And then Biff starts wailing on him. And then about that time, George has had enough. And he finally mans up and throws that big punch and knocks out Biff. And knocks him out cold. Their eyes meet, and we know that part has been done. But the big catch here, Mike, is they've got to dance. They've got to be.
They got to kiss.
They got to kiss under the enchantment of the sea ball. So they've got to figure out a way to get that done. But unfortunately, Marvin Berry and the Starlighters. It was their car, this trunk that he got thrown into, and Marvin hurt his hand.
That's
The guitarist
right.
hurt his hand, Mike. So
Who's going
they
to
don't-
fill in for Marvin, man?
Who's going to fill in for the gun guitar? But of course, Marty saves the day, and he goes up on stage, and they play a song, and they dance, and they kiss, and then Marty looks at the photograph, and he sees they're back in play. They're all back together again, and just before he goes, he decides he's going to like do an encore, an unprompted encore, because he's got so much time to play around with, Mike. He gets to play Johnny Be Good with Marvin Berry, Mike.
Barry.
And so this is, I guess if I had any criticism of the movie, this is the part that I have issue with. The voice dubbing they use for Michael J. Fox.
Yeah, it was
Sing
pretty
here.
cringe.
Like if I did the rest of the podcast as Harvey Firestein, it would be less invasive.
Hey, Casey, hey, baby, look at me. I'm looking at chicky that you ever did see. Hey, Casey, hey, baby, look at us. Well, everything that's happening, fabulous.
This sounded nothing like him whatsoever. But he plays Johnny Be Good, and then ends it out with an Eddie Van Halen guitar solo. And then he remembers he's got to get back to the future here, so he bails out. Did you like how Marvin Berry held the phone out to Chuck?
It's just
Made him listen to it. And he had to tell him that his last name was Berry, so we would understand that he's talking to Chuck Berry.
your cousin, Marvin.
Marvin Berry. So that was kind of cringe, but whatever. So the final act is again, all kidding aside, is still thrilling to this day. It's the storm's coming to a head, and they're running out of time. They know exactly at what time the lightning's supposed to strike the clock, and Doc Brown is up there trying to connect the wires, and they get loose, and he has to climb out on the ledge, and of course the ledge gives way, and Marty gets a safe distance to accelerate, and the car doesn't start, and then it does, and then that last scene is still thrilling, and I can't explain why. It's like it's like the Star Wars, the Death Star trench run. You always know what's going to happen, but it's still in stitches over it. The car starts, he hits that speed, and Doc Brown connects the plug. The lightning strikes, the power runs down to the DeLorean, and Marty ends up back in 1985, just like it says. But a few things have changed, Mike. Marty goes back, and there's a truck in the garage for him. His father's a successful science fiction writer. His mom doesn't drink, and she's hot.
The son doesn't work at Burger King, yeah.
Yeah, he's got like a corporate job, and his sister's got all kinds of boyfriends, and everything's fixed. And so he's getting ready to take his girlfriend out to the lake for the weekend, like he'd always planned on doing. And before that happens, guess what? Doc comes back in a flash, and he says, "Marty, there's a problem." He goes, "What could possibly be wrong? It's not you, Marty. It's your kids." So they no longer need plutonium, Mike, because they developed a Mr. Fusion.
That's right. In 2005, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's
2010. Yeah.
2000. Yeah. So
14 years ago, we developed.
Yeah, 14 years ago, we figured out how to run our cars on beers and banana peels. But he says, "Well, Doc, you don't have enough road." And of course, he utters that famous last line, "Where we're going, we don't need roads." And then they fly away, and then Huey Lewis kicks on, and everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Waka chicka, waka chicka. Fun, no?
Yeah. Right.
So, yeah, I watched this movie as a teenager, and I thought, for a teenager, I liked it because it was fun, and and then I watched it again as an older guy, and I said, for a teenager, this is fun. But we'll get to more of that later, I suppose. So as far as awards and accolades go, Mike, this had an $11 million opening. Remember, they didn't do mega releases back then, so this is a relatively strong opening. But this was a big one. This is at $214 million. Again, this is 1984 money, Mike. It had a $384 million worldwide box office. I think it sits somewhere about 24, 25 in the all-time biggest blockbusters, adjusted for inflation. So everybody saw this movie. It was huge. It got nominated for 4 Oscars. It only won sound effect editing. It got nominated for screenplay, which it lost to Witness. It got nominated for song "Power of Love," but it lost to "Say You, Say Me."
Oh my gosh,
our
White.
friend,
What's
White
that?
Knights, our
Yeah.
friend Lionel Richie. Yeah, he got the
Oh
Oscar
my
that year.
gosh.
Did
Say
we
it
see
together.
on our last trip to New York? We didn't see Huey Lewis, but we were across the theater where his musical is going to come. Right? Was that?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I forgot there was a Huey Lewis in the news.
Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
So you're ever at the Hard Rock Hotel in New York? You'll also have the luxury of going across the street and seeing at the James Earl Jones Theater, right?
Yeah, if it's still going,
Yeah.
that's questionable. It was not
A
quite on
musical-
Broadway. It was off
An
Broadway.
off-Broadway celebration of the music of Huey Lewis, guys. You don't want to miss it. It spawned a couple sequels. You have the Back to the Future trilogy. I saw the second one, Mike. I don't think I've seen the third one in its entirety. I just kind
That's
of
weird. I'm the opposite. I never saw the second one, but I saw the third one.
the second one's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Kind of play around with the time travel aspect a little bit more. I know the third one was set in the West, and
Yeah.
cowboy hats and I don't usually get along. So,
And it's a dual, and Michael J. Fox plays a dual role.
oh, good, multi-talented that kid. It spawned a Broadway musical, as we talked about. It's the inspiration for the Adult Swim show Rick and Morty, which is a fantastic show. I encourage everybody to watch that show. And as we mentioned, it was the number one movie for a staggering 3 straight months. That wasn't really a thing back then, but just a huge hit, a huge cultural impact type thing too as well. The pop culture impact here is pretty legendary. So let's talk about what it meant to us, the host of Grumpy Nostalgia, Mike. So we'll run through our Grump meter. And this is this part of the show where we talk about movies we saw as younger men, and then we talk about them as on our second opinion after we see them again as grumpy old jerks. So, Mike, why don't you head us off?
Yeah, first watch, I can't remember. I know I saw it in the theater, but I couldn't tell you when or where. It was going to be the summer of '85, but I don't know who I saw it with. But I remember liking it at the time. But I guess I didn't like it enough to see the second one, or just didn't want, wasn't interested in the sequel. I don't know. But this is going to be an unpopular opinion, maybe. Of all the movies we've done, as far as rewatching, this was, to me, the best rewatch experience I had. It was such a good movie. And like I said, maybe it's a difference of opinion. But I was amazed at how good this movie was, and after you said that thing about the screenplay being studied in school, I can see why. I mean, in a way, I'm kind of comparing it to not ones we've done before. Like I'm here I am comparing it to Jaws, and Shining, and But it's so good compared to what we see today. There's so many different little side stories and side quests they could have had in this basic future, going back in time travel story. They stayed away from it. It's incredibly on target, and that's what I appreciated the most about it. And my wife and I watching it, we're like, oh my gosh, it's almost, because they were already prepping for the little run, down Main Street, and my wife looks at me and says, it's almost over. I'm like, yeah. I paused, and it was like an hour and 20 minutes in. I was like, yeah, it's clipped by so fast, and I guess that's part of good movie making is you don't realize how much you've already seen and digested in the movie and don't even think about looking at your watch or anything. You just I had the shortest amount of notes I've ever written for one of these. It's like literally 2 lines, and one line is the pinheads. The other line was Orgy American Style, which I thought was a very clever movie name in here. I really enjoyed it. The second watch, I guess, is the best way to say it. And it's just, I know it did the one part is when, he plays Johnny Be Good on there. And that was very, it's one of those moments you couldn't even look at the TV. That one part bothered me. But it's just a little nitpick for me of just the whole story in general. And it was so good. And, like I said, even I know it's maybe aimed at teenagers, but the dialogue is very clever, and even a little thing like turning the name of the mall from Twin Pines to a Solo Pine or Single Pine at the end was such a neat little thing. And it was because he ran over the guy's pine tree, and it was just it's a little small thing in the movie, but little things like that, and little Pepsi Easter eggs aside, it was a really good movie.
No, I'm the same as you, Mike. So what I'm finding more and more often when we do these types of movies, the whole concept of this show is I like these things a lot. Most of the movies we watch, I really liked the first time, with a few exceptions. So what I'm finding, like I said, is that I only remember for those movies that I'm kind of indistinct on. I only remember the cringe parts of those movies for like 35 years, right? So I would remember. I hadn't seen this movie probably 35 years or so. And I saw it, it's just standard theater when I was a kid, and just, okay, good, that's good. Let's move on to the next thing. Didn't make a whole lot out of it. And then I just, from like people making fun of it over the years, or like making fun of like the Marvin Berry thing, or the guitar thing, or Crispin Glover's weird affects and things like that. You only remember the weird stuff, and you think, well, maybe that wasn't really that good, And then I sit down and I watch it, and I realize that, wow, it's really a fun, perfect little movie. And it's going to sound corny here, just forgive me for 5 seconds, Mike. But it was like a very special time in Hollywood back then, where a movie like this could have mass appeal across a whole range of demographics. I think movies now are really pigeonholed for, well, this is a movie you can like, your wife could like, Republicans can like, Democrats can like, your grandmother can like. It has that mass appeal, right? And
right.
I think movies today are only geared for one demo, and there's no crossover appeal whatsoever. Like, is your grandmother going to want to go see Wolverine and Deadpool? No. And so I think these are getting increasingly more niche, and they only care to service, and typically that niche is 14-year-old boys. But this reminds me of a time where, like, this is kind of like it's a Wonderful Life type thing, where those guys like Zemeckis and Spielberg and all those, they grew up on those movies by Capra and all these directors and filmmakers from the 40s and 50s that made these big Hollywood mass appeal things. And I think it's just kind of, sadly, I think that's kind of thinning out a little bit. I don't think that's really sustained a whole lot, but it was neat to go back in the time machine, so to speak.
Yeah.
And see what movies were like back then. You can watch this movie with anybody. You can recommend this movie to anybody, and they're going to enjoy it. And I think that's just a testament to what a great script. And this type of filmmaking is sadly just not as prevalent as it used to be. So.
Yeah, I think we all changed the name to Sad Nostalgia.
well, let's not get too.
Well,
yeah,
I know what you mean. Though it's a good sentiment, because these movies still exist, and anybody can still watch them. So that's what's the best part. And this movie won't be remade for at least another 15, 20 years.
As long as those two guys don't kick, we're safe.
There you go.
All right, so we spent a lot of time reviewing time travel movies, but we want to spend a little more time this week and maybe discussing some of our personal favorites that we haven't kind of come up in conversation yet. So for this week's installment of You Just Made the List, Pal, we're going to talk about our favorite time travel movies that we haven't spoke about already. So, Mike, this is just wide open. It could be TV, film, conceptual, and book, whatever. Give me 3 of your favorite examples of time travel movies and why they're so important to you.
All right. Hot Tub Time Machine 1, 2, and 3. No, kidding.
All right. Good night, everybody.
There you go. Good night. First one that I could, like I said, I usually just do this by impulse, whatever first came to mind. First one for me is Butterfly Effect, from 2004. It's one of those movies that has Ashton Kutcher in it, so that's kind of that may be a -1 star for that alone, but he's not that bad.
Not that bad, no.
It's kind of like a movie if, say, Stephen King wrote a time travel movie. That's what this movie reminds me of. It's kind of the horrors of what could happen if you do go back in time and try to change things. And what's unusual about this movie is there's no science to it, really. There's no time machine. The guy's just able to do it by just projecting his mind, looking at his journal, and going back. And it's really clever because he has blackouts as a kid, and that ends up when his blackouts correspond with him going back in time and trying to fix things. It's really cleverly done. And it's, like I said, it's more or less, I don't want to give it, I still feel like with some of these newer movies, I don't want to give any spoilers, but it's it's kind of a dark, and if you do watch this movie and haven't seen it yet, do not watch the regular release version. Watch the director's cut. Just there's tip for me to use. It's a little darker. Actually, it's a lot darker. But that feels like the theme of the movie for the whole way, and it carries it through. Let's just say, and I really enjoyed it. It's like I said, it's not your typical. Gosh, gee, what I'm from the future. Look at me.
Yeah.
He just basically switches bodies with his younger self, but what he does in the past affects what happens in the future. So that's my first choice, Butterfly Effect.
Yeah, that's a great pick. Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised with that one the first time I saw that. I was like, wow, I was expecting Dude, Where's My Car? And it ended up being like a real, like you said, it was a Stephen King /
It's very cleverly, and it's more mind. It's more of a theater of a mind than like just hey, I got this fancy looking box I'm gonna go into and go back in time. It
was like a Rod Serling type thing. It was really cool. Yeah, good pick. All right, so I'm going to go very obvious here for my first one. It's going to be The Time Machine. From 1960, and this was a movie again I used to watch a lot on local television. I'd grown up as a kid. This was a creature feature thing. I mean, that was really about monsters, but the Morlocks, I remember those guys being super scary. One of the most more interesting creatures ever created for cinema. But this is about a guy developing a time machine in London in the middle 19th century. And what I liked about it, Mike, is across the street from his laboratory was a haberdashery, and they used the passage of time by doing like time lapse. They used like time lapse, so and you would see like how the fashion would change, and that would indicate that's how they mark time. It was kind of cool. It's like, well, that place has been in business a long time, but they cataloged how they track time by that. It starred the adorable Yvette Mimieux, who I've always had a big crush on. Also in this movie, Mike, is Sebastian Cabot, who we all remember as Mr. French.
That's right.
Yeah. But it was just a neat story about, the impact of man going into the future and how society could change, and the inherent dread of it was a morality tale. It was science fiction. It was all those things kind of wrapped up in a nice neat little sci-fi movie, early classic. So that's The Time Machine from 1960. That's my first pick.
No Orlando Jones, huh?
No Orlando Jones, sorry.
Darn it. Oh, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention Butterfly Effect had Eric Stoltz in it. So
that's correct. Go. Yeah, hey, there you go.
All right, second movie I have is Donnie Darko. I probably mentioned this on another list, but it's such a good movie. Why not mention it twice?
Yep.
It also deals with time. It's a time loop, and it's kind of the same as Butterfly Effect. It involves a guy that goes back in time, but has to kind of like, again, I don't want to give away. I feel really bad from some of these movies that we mentioned. They're not like, Jurassic Park that everybody knows about. Some of these movies haven't been seen by everybody, so I'm a little skittish.
I think Donnie Darko is spoiler proof because it's so abstract and such a mind trip that
it's hard to explain.
Yeah.
Even. I mean, a guy, wakes up and from a dream and sees this demon rabbit that basically, he follows him outside his house, comes back and finds out a jet engine has landed in his room and his whole house is on fire. And, but he found this imaginary, I want to put that in air quotes, rabbit tells him, hey kid, you're going to the world's going to end in a month. And, you got like 28 days or so to whatever. And it's really interesting because it reflects on time travel, but it also goes into like what you should do to like it's like I said, like Butterfly Effect is kind of a cause effect thing where what you do here, at the end of it, he has to basically find his destiny or his density by returning back to that time and having it happen this time, but this time he's not in it. He's in his room the second time, so he actually I can't explain this movie. It has to be seen to be believed. It was a bomb in the movie theater because it involved a plane crash and it was supposed to be released, I think, in 2000, the summer of 2001. So you can kind of follow the
takes care of that.
And so it became one of those movies that like you had to see it based on like a DVD release or on streaming now. But I would recommend Donnie Darko. It's like I said, it's that causal loop kind of movie. It does make sense. It has one of those endings that you talk about for like an hour after you see it. You're like, wait a minute, what? Okay, and I love those kind of movies. So anyway, that's a good one.
That's a great pick. Yeah, just finished watching Presumed Innocent with starring Jake Gyllenhaal, the miniseries they did from the Scott Turow novel. And I was struck by his performance because he's an adult in this movie with a family and kids. And like, I remember seeing him as that kid actor in Donnie Darko, you know, and it's weird to think it was a smack in the face of how much time has passed.
I know. And he was in a good time movie with a Source Code?
Source Code, yeah.
Where he's in the Chicago train, and that was a great time.
That's great.
I don't want to do that. That's not my third pick, but go ahead.
All right, slow down. All right, my next pick is going to be Army of Darkness from, I want to say 1992. I saw this at a small theater in Kankakee, Illinois at a 10:30 show. I was the only guy there. And I was on summer break from college. And this is, I guess it's a air quote sequel to Evil Dead 2. It follows the adventures of Ash. He goes back in time to the Middle Ages and gets into some shenanigans with feudal lords and Vikings. And turns out there's this evil demon. He plays a dual role here as well, Mike. He plays the evil skeleton lord.
Badass.
But he convinces the locals, those archaic guys in the Middle Ages, how to fight this battle against this great evil, the skeleton army.
Yes,
and it's all practical effects and stop motion. It's really, it doesn't hold up today, but just the dark humor, the visuals, the makeup, practical effects, and just Bruce Campbell. There's nothing wrong with Bruce Campbell ever. Even the movie Icebreaker with Sean Astin, he was great. There's a great scene here where he beheads the evil demon and throws him in the ground. He's going to bury him. And the demon's giving him a bunch of crap. Is, when I get out of here, you're dead, mister. and Bruce says, hey, what's that on your face? And the skeleton goes, what? And he just puts a big shovel full of dirt in his face. It's one of the greatest scenes ever. He's mocking the evil Dark Lord. It's fantastic. But so that's my next pick, Army of Darkness from 1992.
All right. Well, my third pick, and some honorable mentions here. I'm going to go with, I'm going to give you two bad ones and two good ones.
Okay.
Bad one, what's your boggle, if you actually like Demolition Man? Thank you. The Japanese Sandy Frank distributed movie Time of the Apes.
Time of the Apes, fantastic. How dare you? That's a great movie.
I'm sorry. That movie should have ended, like 30 minutes before it actually ends. Yeah. So those are my bad ones. A couple of good ones. Star Trek episode. One of my favorite, not the old Star Trek, but the Star Trek Next Generation. They had an episode that involved a time loop. It's called Cause and Effect, and it's one of the most famous episodes. But it's the one I remember the most. But they're stuck in a causality loop where they end up running into another spaceship and blowing up, and everybody dies. But then they wake up and relive the same day over and over and over again until Data, the robot, the android on the ship, figures it out, and it's really a clever episode, and has Kelsey Grammer in there. But my other honorary nominee is a Korean movie called The Call from 2020. It's not the Halle Berry really bad movie. This is a Korean movie.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah,
it's really, again, it's got a grim kind of future to it.
Yeah, I think. Yeah.
But yeah, the girl, it's really cleverly done. It involves a girl receiving phone calls from 25 years in the past, and basically this girl in the past can change things that happen in the future to this other girl. It's, like I say, just watch it. It's really good. Yeah. And but my third pick is a Star Trek movie, Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, which came out in 1986, 87. It involved our gang kind of after the third movie ended. They, steal a Klingon ship and come back to Earth because the Earth's in trouble. There's a satellite circling the Earth that's sucking all the water out of the oceans and causing heat waves and all kind of weather effects. And our, Spock figures out that the only thing that can communicate with the satellite are humpback whales. And there are no more humpback whales in 2250 or whatever this is. And so they have to go back in time, which they do by slingshotting around the sun, which is kind of cool. Mm-hmm. And they come back to Earth, and then there's, it's kind of one of those movies that's like, it's got a good plot to it, but it also has the comedy of having to ride the bus and hide, Spock's ears and listen to funny music, or hearing Bones complain about like primitive medical technology here. I can't work with this. It's really got a lot of that, of course, but it mainly focus. It's an environmental message that's not heavy-handed. It's really well done. It's kind of basically telling us, hey, this could happen to our planet. It's it's actually directed by Leonard Nimoy too, which surprised me. I forgot how many of these movies he directed.
Yeah.
But it's the even number Star Trek movie theory. This one's considered
so it's a good one, right?
Yeah, it's considered one of the better ones. Of the older Star Trek movies, and this is Star Trek 4 with Roman numerals, not Star Trek 4 with the Arabic number like J.J. Abrams is going to do. So be careful. Be careful when you're looking this one up.
That's good. Did Leonard Nimoy sing the Ballad of Bilbo Baggins at any point during this one?
No, but there was a whole backstory, I believe, about salary disputes between him and Shatner. Even then in this movie, yeah.
None of those guys got along, and they had the biggest cash show. I could never understand that.
Yeah,
so.
It was a very successful movie.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. All right, that's a good one, Mike. All right, so my final pick here is a little more recent for a grumpy nostalgia type thing, but I'm going to go with Edge of Tomorrow from 2014.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. This
is a Tom Cruise vehicle where Bill Paxton was in this, Mike. I think
yes.
One of his final roles. He plays a military guy, white collar guy that's not really involved. There's an alien invasion, and he gets put into the fight against his will. And on the battlefield, he kills one of the aliens that kind of the creepers are. They call them some sort of weird, the great aliens. In this film,
I forgot the names of them.
But he kills one of them, and they're tough to kill. But as the beast dies, the blood gets in Tom Cruise's bloodstream. And one of the ways these aliens had figured out how to attack the Earth so well is they have the ability to control time, but only not the drones, but some of the higher evolved lieutenants of this alien army had this ability to bend time and space. And Tom Cruise gets this ability too. So after he dies, he's suddenly woken up at his set point in time. It's a combination of like Groundhog Day and Alien, right? So he every time he gets killed, he has to go back and he live that same day over and over again. And it was this fascinating little. It's based off a Japanese manga comic, which I think is probably what kind of shines through some of the Hollywood glitz. But it's just a very intense, tight story. The things he does, the amount of times he has to die, the things he learns, how he passes it along to his female co-star, just very interesting. And I for a movie in the 20-teens, this is really one that stood out to me because they used the time element of it extremely well. It was the driving point of the plot, but it was just a very intense movie, and I think they're making a sequel to it, Mike. So hang on, we'll see how that works.
I thought maybe if Tom Cruise was still alive, he wouldn't.
Yeah. So the original title was "All You Need Is Kill," and I think the point was all you need to do is get yourself killed, and then you could solve the riddle. But I think the sequel is going to be called "Live, Die, Repeat," which I hope they keep that original title. That would be great, but I doubt they'll probably just call it Edge of Tomorrow 2. But whatever. But just a great Tom Cruise movie, Mike, and I'm always up for one of those.
Oh yeah.
Couple honorable mentions here, of course. 12 Monkeys, which is a movie that we covered on the podcast a while back from 1995. That was Terry Gilliam's take on time travel. Great Bruce Willis role there as well. I think Peggy Sue Got Married should be in there as well. That's a fantastic little-known film by Francis Ford Coppola. She goes back in time to her days in high school, but she remembers, exactly what happened. So she's going back as a high schooler with everything that she knew, as an adult. And it's got a fantastic performance by Nick Cage. Let's be honest. Jim Carrey is in this movie.
Oh my gosh.
And Jim Carrey could do the same thing with his shoulder that Ronnie Cox could do, Mike. He did it in this movie. He threw it over his shoulder. But yeah, that was a great, fun movie where, it's just, again, no one watched it. No one knows about it, but if you're ever bored, rent that movie. It'd be a good bit of fun for everybody. So, all right. So I think that's going to have to wrap it up, Mike. I think we hit the bottom about 20 minutes ago, but
great Scott.
Yeah. So You can check out anything you want to know about this show, if you dare, by going to our Instagram account. That's grumpy_nostalgia. You can send us an email, nostalgiagrumps@gmail.com. We do have a YouTube channel. Want to get some feedback on which one of our current podcasts you'd like to see converted into a video companion. So send your thoughts and opinions to us at our website or an email. Check out the Buzzsprout link. A lot of you are listening to the podcast through the Buzzsprout website. You may have noticed under the title there's a send us a message link. We'd encourage you to click on that and tell us what you think. And that should do it. So Mike, anything else you want to say before we get out of here?
Klaatu Barada Miltic.
All right, Mike, it's time to make like a tree and get out of here. So for Mike James, this is Justin, and we will see you again next time.
What are you looking at, butthead?